Good afternoon, morning, good something, everybody. I have been up and running and moving all over since I woke up at like 6:30 this morning. So I don't know if I know what time it is anymore. Got up this morning.
Building your online business?
I have to mute that. And like I got Riley around the neighborhood. It's muggy this morning. Everything is very, very much humid here because it rained last night and it's horrible. But I got Riley around the neighborhood. And then I spent this morning on Sean's channel, the guy who sews. We sewed some stuff up. He gave me a little bit of an Aussie quiz to figure out, how much I know. And I kind of surprised him because, I mean, I shouldn't have told him that I watched some Australian YouTubers and stuff, but it worked. I got some fun stuff figured out. Like, I know what a dunny is, and I just laugh at that. Then I grabbed breakfast finally because, I was hungry and got that and I grabbed the stuff to be trimmed. So I'm all trimmed up for the project this morning, which is going to be a lot of fun. I see Fallon has shown up. Hi, Fallon. How you doing? And Charlotte. Uh, my friend Steven is video bombing me for a minute. Hi, everybody in the Sode. I'll be there soon. Steven is hosting a pop-up Sode on his Zoom. It is not broadcast anywhere. It is just Zoom only. And it's just folks sitting there chit-chatting, enabling each other, and sewing and saying, how awesome everybody's work is. Which I will be going once this live is over, probably after I walk Riley again, because the weather is questionable today. It's 80 Fahrenheit, which I don't know what that is in Celsius because I'm not doing math. Uh, and muggy, but it said the weather forecast said that it was going to be hot, like showers off and on. So I'm like, if I can get Riley out when it's not showering, then that's going to be awesome. Charlotte says the quiz was fun. It was a blast. Uh, Good morning, Dale. Good morning, Elaine, my neighbor. Steven says that they're saying bad things about me, which means, they're telling the truth. Oh, that's a lot of fun. So, yeah, it's been a week. I don't know what else to say about it, but I'm happy to be spending some time here in the sewing room, spending some time with y'all. Good morning, Sally. So yeah, it's been interesting. This past Sunday, I did Stephanie's retreat, Stephanie and Shannon's retreat. They had two projects. One project was the picnic pinwheel quilt, which I am working on. I have one block done, and I have another 8 to go. And Shannon's project was a beach bag. And let me grab. It's almost done. I've got to get the backside. I got to get top stitched down, and then I just got to close it up and bind it. That has been so much fun to put together. I just wish I had more time this week to get it focused on. Hi, Ingrid from Steven's News or Steven's Sode. Elena's right. It is muggy, ugly here. I do what I can when it's these muggy days, but it happens. Weather happens. Hi again, Sean. Sean had some great Australian slang things and terms and titles. Like I said, I watch a lot of Australian streamers. They don't necessarily get into a lot of those details, but there's a lot of there were a lot of things that I have heard in various things, and just being able to chit chat about something that I have bits of knowledge of with somebody who has tons of knowledge of was a lot of fun. So I have on Sean's live this morning, I managed to get the triangles sewn into squares. And then after the live and after I ate breakfast, I went from I pressed open the squares, or pressed to one side. They're pressed to one side, not open, because I ain't got time for that opening stuff. Especially when I know the seams will fit properly. And I trimmed the dog ears off, so everything is basically the size that they need to be. I say basically because when I went to work on this block and I did the measurements, it was almost exactly the size I need. Some were just, a half a hair too short. Some were like right smack on. So I said, I'm not even going to measure these, because if I did the same equivalent 1/4 inch on this one as I'm doing on these ones, it's going to work. I do a lot of with feeling. If you like watch a chef cook, and Uncle Roger says this a lot, is use feeling with what you're doing. So I'm feeling that these are going to be good blocks. And if they're not, I can fudge it a little bit. Good morning, Donnell. I was watching you a little while ago while you were doing your cutting. Good morning, Del Marie and Chloe. Charlotte says that she is working on pinwheel blocks too. 6 done, 3 to go. You're gonna beat me. What I don't get done during the live, I will continue on Steven's Sew Day. Again, after Riley, although Riley may have to wait. It just got darker really quickly outside. Luckily, she went this morning. So let's see if I can get moved to the other camera. Oh. So the way this works is we have our 4 pinwheel portions. And they go together in a pinwheel direction. And for you folks that are OCD like me, you don't like these two how they are, because these two are pointing in the same direction with the what is that? With the grain, and these two are not. So I'm just going to be able to swap these and get them in a pleasing direction. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your pop-up Sew Day Zoom link. I will try to remember to share it again as I am departing. Let me see if I can copy it now. It won't let me copy it now. Darn you. Well, maybe it did. Nope, it would not. So I will have to grab it late. No, let me see if I can grab it now. That way I have it in the buffer. Actually, it won't. My keyboard is... I think the battery is dying. Or the keyboard's dying. One or the other. So I have, in this case, when I have directionals, I have all the directionals going the same way. And if I flip these in, I want this intersection to nest. So the top intersection is nesting. There's nothing to nest on the bottom. So I'm going to flip these same way. That way, when everything is flipped the same direction, you sew the same direction, the muscle memory works better. And I'm just going to do one for now to make sure that I have everything going in the same direction as my first block, because it has been almost a week since I worked on this. And anytime that I put something down, I need to have a little bit of a refresher. I didn't necessarily need the refresher for putting the two triangles together because it was just putting two triangles together. I did make sure that I got the um, patterns paired so that I was happy with the color combinations. I discovered while I was cutting that I bought two of the same fabric, thinking that one was a teal, one was a blue, but don't tell anybody that. So I am using one as a teal, one as a blue. And it just happens to work well. And I have my iron heated up so I can just check this and make sure that I'm still pinwheeling, which I am. And I'm going to look at the back to see which direction I am going to press my seams. With my triangles, I have the seams going this way and that way, so I want this seam to go this way. That'll make this flatter. And then, if I remember correctly, this is going to coincidentally give me a nesting lock whenever I sew the two rows together. This pattern is Stephanie's pattern. There is a link in the description. And if somebody wants to ask Nightbot to share the pattern, it's exclamation pattern in the chat window. The pattern requires a handful of fat eighths or fat quarters, depending on how much color variety you want. Because of where I bought the fabric, it was all fat quarters. But that just means I can make another one. So as I said, the way that I have everything pressed, I'm going to essentially be able to lock this seam because the feed dogs will be pulling the fabric a little bit, and the little bit of a lip that happens when you have these nested in opposite directions, but the top one pointing that way, helps just make sure your point doesn't shift too much, or that your center seam doesn't shift too much. And I am kind of seeing I'm not exactly the same size of all these pieces, but you know, a little bit of wiggle room doesn't hurt. Thank you, Charlotte and Elaine, for asking Nightbot for the pattern. Stephanie writes really awesome patterns. The cutting instructions went quickly, and the sewing instructions have gone very quickly as well. If you ask Steven, just looking at the picture doesn't always tell you what you need to do. And to be honest, when I was looking for backing for the quilt, Stephanie said you need this much backing for the quilt in the pattern. And I did not know if the quilt was going to be, or if the seam needed to be horizontal or vertical for the backing. Because as I got up to the cutting table, I said, "Oh, oops, the fabric that I'm asking for is directional. I need to make sure that the dimensions are correct so that I don't buy too short of fabric. And I just pulled up a picture. I was like, oh, it's a square. Not exactly a square. It's a slight rectangle. Stephen will attest to that. So the reason why I pulled out my seam ripper is I want my center seam to twirl. And sometimes you can just pop the seam open. Sometimes you just have to take your seam ripper and carefully pop the last stitch or two so that it will open up like this. Now there's one more that when I get a bulky seam, it doesn't like to open up as easily. So it's going to be a twisted seam in the center. And you just put a little bit of a heat on it. And that usually just tames it down just enough. And if you're able to lock that seam in the very center, you get a really, really flat point. I don't know how well you can see, but this is a very flat point. And I'm a couple hairs off over here, but nobody is going to look that closely to see that. And for dimensions, I'm a hair over on that one. And I'm smack on that direction. So I'm pretty good with the dimensions. So I definitely am not going to even attempt to trim anything else down. And I now have 2 blocks done. Terry says she loves the pattern. It is great. She finished her picnic pinwheel quilt and add an extra row of blocks to make it a little bit bigger. I did see that picture. That looked really awesome. Charlotte also says that she loved the quilt and loves this pattern. It's a great pattern. Speaking of loving things that Stephanie has done, I was flipping through the YouTubes between, breakfast and starting my live here. And I saw Stephanie's preview card for her 5 o'clock video. And she's going to be introducing her autumn box. And I'm already drooling over the colors. So I'm going to be excited about that. And I can't wait till 5 o'clock to see exactly what the colors are going to be. Or not colors, if she gives us any hints as to what the project is going to be. The good thing about the pinwheel block is as long as you follow the other instructions properly, there is no way to accidentally put these in the wrong order. It's always going to be a pinwheel. With half square triangles, you got to make sure that you go light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, or however you do those. With pinwheels, they all will go the same direction. So I will do it like this. I'm just going to start chain piecing my next handful of blocks just to help this piece go. I know they say it seems like it goes faster, or I'm sorry, they say that it goes faster. I don't think it really does. I just think it seems it does because you're doing the same thing over and over and over. But, it's always going to take X amount of time to sew a seam. It's going to have to take X amount of time to press that seam. Now, you're probably saving that few seconds by not going back and forth to your pressing and cutting station and stuff. But if we're talking sewing time, I think it really is about the same amount of sewing, whether you chain piece or whether you stop in between. And I really love just pushing these two seams as close together as I can. And that helps get a really tight point in there. Laura says the Aussie quiz was fun and she learned a lot. I learned a lot too. And I had no idea that he was going to be doing an Aussie quiz. Uh, he told me like a few minutes before that he had, like summer questions and stuff like that. He wanted to do something a little bit different. I was like, okay, great. And then in the middle, he's like, okay, we're going to do an Aussie quiz. I'm like, okay, I'm all for it. And like I said, it was a lot of fun. There was a bunch of terms that I was surprised to learn what they were. And there was a bunch of terms that I was like, ooh, I know this. Okay, we're looking at fishies. And I think I got to swap these two just so that the fishies. Well, this is going to be interesting. That doesn't work because I swapped the wrong two. I think. This is going to. Directional fabric is fun. No, it goes this way. How about if I try it? Oh, my directionality is going to be upset. No, it's not. No, it's not. There we go. So now the fish are just swimming around in a circle because they're going down, they're going to go this way, they're going to go up, they're going to go that way. So that's going to work. Something still doesn't feel right, but I'm going to ignore it because I like the way it is. I'm not over analyzing it. Hey, John and Curtis with Guyscraft 2. If you haven't checked out their channel, they are a lot of fun. I did see this morning that John apparently has been shopping again. But he's also slowly working on finishing projects. They finished a couple projects recently, which means they're allowed to buy new stuff because they haven't started a new project yet. Seems like that Steven, he said he can screw up. Have you met him? It does happen. And Terry is right. Steven makes beautiful quilts. Sue says, good morning. Her pinwheel quilt is awaiting final borders. And she also followed the directions. Directions are sometimes a suggestion. And I say that explicitly because when I take the GPS, it tells me to go one way. And I'm like, no, you're wrong. I mean, it's right. It's technically right, which is the best kind of right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the fastest. And I will take my route and shave 2 minutes off the time. I get it. 2 minutes is not a lot, but 2 minutes, even if it took me 2 minutes longer, my route is better on my sanity because I don't have to try to cut over 6 lanes of traffic. Directions are like speed limits. Speed limits are definitely a suggestion in most areas. Although we are trying to think about speed humps in our neighborhood because we have a lot of speeders that have come through. And the speeders are in the next neighborhood. They cut through, which shaves like a minute off their commute. But they will just fly down the actually this road in front of me and also the other road because it's kind of like a almost like a slight square. Um, both roads have a curve, but they intersect at two ends, which is a nice way to build a neighborhood. Oh, look, it's back to sunny again. See, the weather here is just crazy. My smart speaker, I could say, "Hey, when will the rain start?" and it knows based on the estimated radar that rain's probably expected at this amount of time. And I'll ask throughout the day, and the rain start and time frame is always different every single time I ask, unless I ask it, within the same half hour or hour or however long it takes for the forecast to think about updating. So at first it was like, yeah, it's gonna rain from about 1 a.m. through about 5 p.m. I'm like, okay, yeah, Riley will be unhappy, but I'll still get her around the neighborhood. Then when I went to bed, it said that it'll be rainy from about 11 to 8 today. And I'm like, okay. And I woke up and it's like, yeah, maybe it'll rain from about 1 to 9. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Kathleen's like, unless Cobb County's finest are around. I am lucky enough. Well, I generally don't speed. I'm going to first say that. There are some roads where it's more difficult to speed on, but, or I'm sorry, it's more difficult not to speed on, like the road that's outside the neighborhood. It is very difficult to drive and stay underneath the speed limit because it's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. And you just want to drive 45 because that's studies have been done that most people can feel what is safe. And I forget what country they did this in, but they just basically put up no speed limit signs at first, and they do trials to say, how does the road feel? And they've generally basically built the road for the speed limit. So a wider road is going to have a faster speed limit, and a more densely packed road or a smaller road is going to have a smaller speed limit. And the road out there, it goes from 45 to 35, but the road doesn't really change widths or the neighborhood. Well, okay, it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane each way, but like the population density doesn't change, the width of the lane doesn't change. There's not a lot of change between the two speed limits, so it feels like you should still be able to do 45. Thankfully, I'm only on that road for a couple hundred feet, so I'm not particularly speeding too long if I end up not remembering to slow down. But normally, like I said, I will do my best to do the speed limit if I know what the speed limit is, because if I don't know who's living in the area, or if I don't know, if there's doggos that like to walk in the area, maybe kids playing and stuff. I don't want to have any problems with um, the neighbors. And like I said, I've lived in areas where people have just gone speeding. Um, where I lived in Massachusetts at my grandmother's house, there was a side road that was um, 5 houses long, and the speeds that people would get to there was ridiculous. And like kids would be playing. So yeah. Now when I'm on the interstate, that can be a different story. If I know an area is definitely not going to have any officers, then I might go a little bit faster. If I know an area is probably a speed trap, I will go slower. Unless I can't go any faster because traffic. And apps like Waze, they're generally good, but on other times it's like, there could always be an officer that they haven't seen yet. Kathleen, um, Kathleen says in her neighborhood is 10 because of the kids and animals. That's how I feel like it is. It should be here. Um, I will do my best to keep it slower because so many people with animals here, and I would rather let the animals have the right of way. To heck with humans. I mean, you could always grow a new human, but finding a new animal, yeah, that's it. I know without the humans, we wouldn't have the animals. Uh, we had we did I guess it's a speed test in the neighborhood recently, and under the old rules, we had to have an average speed of 35 in order to be eligible for speed humps, and we did not make that. And I guess under the new rules, it has to be 32, and we still didn't make that. And I think it's mostly because um, they did well. I can tell you the two main reasons that I'm going to say. Number one, they didn't put the speed detectors in the correct locations. They put them in areas that are um, like closer to bends, where yeah, that's more dangerous if you speed, but it doesn't give you enough room to get up to speed. But the other reason why I think it's happening is we have this one lady in the neighborhood. I think she's only allowed to smoke in her car. I don't think she's allowed to smoke in the house uh, for whatever reason. I don't think she smokes, outside on her property or anything else. She seems to only smoke in the car. And she drives like half a mile an hour through the neighborhood so that she can have that extended time for smoking. So every time that we had, a 40-mile an hour person go through, and then she goes through at half a mile an hour, we now have an average of what, 22 miles an hour. So yeah, I feel like we need to tell the cops to discount Miss 5 miles an hour. Good morning, Stephanie, who has thunderstorms happening. So trying to keep connections. Sorry to hear about the thunderstorms. I would be enjoying it, but at the same time, I understand the connection issues because of thunderstorms. So hopefully you have good connections with the thunderstorms. Riley would be unhappy with thunderstorms. My sister was upset yesterday because apparently somebody was doing fireworks. She thinks it was the town, and her dog's not thrilled with him. So she was just unhappy about the whole fireworks situation. And then, as I'm going to bed, I hear fireworks, and I'm like, oh, yeah, the Braves must have had a home game. Because they do Friday night fireworks there. Which I still haven't tried to figure out. No, the trees are too close and they're not quite high enough up. And because I'm like, I wonder if we could see the fireworks. I've never tried, but I don't think that we have enough height here to see fireworks. Stephanie says they need the rain, so it's okay. I think everybody needs rain right now. I was looking at my grass the other day and it's looking a little pale. So what is everybody working on? I saw that some people are working on this pattern. I see that some people are in Steven's pop-up sew day, watching me as they sew. Hi, pop-up sew day! Shout outs to you all. I'm waiting for my iron to heat up, so I'm just going to get some of these prepped in the correct direction so I can just open them up, press them open. Yesterday I received the backing for my jelly roll race that I did on Stephanie's channel last week. A group of us, me, Stephanie, Shannon, Steven, and Ingrid and Ingrid's friend, we did a jelly roll race for charity event. And it was a lot of fun. That first bit is torture, but once we got just the started, well, that sewing them end to end was torture. That very first seam of 800 inches was a lot of torture, but once everything else got further, it got to be a lot of fun. But I ordered backing and it arrived yesterday, which means I can now work on quilting it when I get a minute. I'm a little annoyed I still haven't heard back from the charity on how to get it to them. But that just means I need to harass them a little bit more. Steven's saying next time that Pop Up Soda and my live are on the same time, we should give a Zoom link so we can make it visually interactive. I'll have to figure out what you're exactly meaning. I think I know what you're meaning, but uh, that would probably mean I would need another camera. It would also probably put everybody in the pop-up soda technically on audio on YouTube. And I know a lot of people don't like themselves to be on video on YouTube. I don't know how many people are a fan of audio on YouTube. Okay. I think this is going to be a fun quilt. And the color theme is um, going to be matching very well with the bag. We'll have to figure it out, Stephen, because I know you're doing a pop-up so day for your birthday in a couple weeks, and it's going to be a Saturday, which is my lives. So we will see if we can figure that out. If you don't like to be on it, can't you cover the camera? I mean, that is true, but it's not quite the same still. And I think what Steven is suggesting is basically have all of Pop Up Soday as the partner of this or something like that. I think because if we had everybody on Pop Up Soday on a Zoom in YouTube, we would have all kinds of little boxes. And I was thinking maybe we could do it like a webinar, but then that would mean people can't talk, which is probably not the intent of what Steven is thinking. But we will get it figured out to see what Steven is interested in. And we are all about experiments. But I am of the belief that I don't want I don't think it'd be right to force people to be on YouTube if they don't want to, because I know a lot of people don't want to be on YouTube. So Kathleen, what I'm saying is my friend Steven is hosting a pop-up so day right now as we speak. It's on Zoom. Anybody is welcome to join, whether you are sewing or crocheting or even cleaning your sewing space, organizing stuff. It doesn't matter. It's just if you want friends to interact with at the same time. His primary requirement is he wants you on video, and it's a safety/security reason. He wants to make sure that everybody who is in there is who they say they are. So they it's always a lot of fun. Everybody's enabled. The challenge is to figure out what we can convince Steven to buy next. And it's a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of awesome people there. And Steven is suggesting somehow connecting his pop-up so day into my live, but yeah, that starts to figure out the whole logistics of it, and we can figure. He and I will talk a little bit later to see what he's thinking and if it might work or might not. Because apparently right now I am being live streamed into his pop-up so day. I know the full details for his pop-up so day and the link are in any of his videos on his channel. His channel is The Idiot Quilter. I'm sorry, it's Bland Designs and the Idiot Quilter. But yeah, he's got all the details there. He did post it earlier in the chat, and if he wants to, he can post it again if he has a second. And it's just a Zoom link. If you have Zoom on your device, you can pop in, and you'll see 20, 30. I think we've had up to like 50 folks in his pop-up sew days, and it's just we're sewing, we're chit-chatting, and it's basically you have interactive people to sew with instead of like on YouTube, where most of the time I mean, it's definitely not a one-on-one conversation with somebody, but most of the time there's that whole delay and everything else. Uh, oh, closed captioning is saying soda instead of so day. Okay. Yeah, not talking about soda. And apparently my accent is a little crazy for AI closed captioning. And considering some of the stuff that I've heard Google think that I've said when I tell Google to do a reminder, I'm like, what did I say? Because I'll have it pop up on my screen 3, 4, a week later. And I'm like, okay, what was I trying to say when these words came up on my screen? Which I'm not as bad as Mom was with leaving voicemail messages, because I would get um, transcribed voicemails from her, and I would read the voicemail. And I'm like, what words are she saying? And it's because she would mumble a lot, and I think a lot of hearing from her is the reason why I do my best sometimes to enunciate. Uh, but yeah, just hearing or reading the voicemails and be like, okay, what did she say? And then my voicemail would highlight the words that it transcribed with the word being said. And I was like, okay, so you thought that this said this. I don't know how you heard that, but okay. But everybody gets used to hearing everybody else. And I think the funniest story that I have with accents is in 93, so back in the 1900s, my sister and I, that's when we moved to Massachusetts, but Dad stayed in South Carolina. So um, it was, I think it was it was either winter of 97 or winter of 98. And I went back to South Carolina to visit Dad for summer or for winter break. And I stopped at where a friend of the family works. And there was a conversation between one of the customers and said family friend. And I heard him say, "Hey, Andy, do you have a corn book?" And I was like, okay, how much of a book do you need for corn? I mean, there's so many ways you can prepare it. It's on the cob, it's, whole kernel, creamed, bread. I mean, there's not really that much you can do. But I'm like, why is he asking for a corn book? And I'm just listening to the conversation, like, and they're talking, he's like, I had one, but I don't know where it is, da 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 da. And I'm just confused. And then the guy says, yeah, something about, I have a penny that is a certain age, and I was wondering if it had any value. And I was like, you were talking a coin book. But the accent, and everybody there knows the accent and how everybody talks, it was corn. And I just felt silly because I'm like, 5 years before that, I would have completely understood because I would have been in the accent all the time. But having been out of the accent, uh, it it was a little crazy. And Steven says I sound like Bubba Gump. I mean, if I really want to get, the whole Southern drawl out, I can. When I go visit Massachusetts, it gets really messed up because even different areas in Massachusetts have different accents. And my accent will drift along. Uh, I went, it was 10 years ago now. I went up to, I was up in Massachusetts, went to the college that I went to just to basically see what has changed in the 100 million years since I left. And I asked a question, and people started staring at me. And I was like, okay, why are you staring at me? Which accent did I ask it in? And apparently I asked it in 3 accents because they're like, okay, we heard Southern, we heard like what sounded to be Western Mass, and then we also heard Eastern Mass. And I'm like, yeah, that happens to me. In college, I got a phone call from Dad, and uh, my best friend in college, she happened to be in the dorm room when Dad called, and she said, while you were on the phone, I just heard your accent just go southern and southern and southern further south. Which is kind of bad when I'm talking to folks in the UK because somehow, and I've never lived there, never been there, but my voice will start to pick up a UK accent. And I'm like, I'm not trying to mock you. I'm not trying to do anything. And it's just like, it just happens. Accents are a silly thing. And Atlanta Atlanta itself doesn't sound like it has an accent because we have so many people from so many areas that everything has just gotten to be a little wonky with accents. But if you get a little far out from Atlanta, you can tell. And I just mentally giggle because I'm like, yeah, I used to sound like this. Yes, uh, Kathleen is right. The Southern accent is very much like a British accent, so maybe that's why I kind of can shift that way. And New York is very much Italian. And I've heard it's that way because, like New England, they wanted to basically part ways with the British because they weren't happy with a lot of the things that uh, the mother country was doing. So they're like, yeah, we want to shift our language a bit even though they have a whole bunch of towns that are named after things in Britain, and are pronounced the same way as basically the Britain stuff, but they shifted their language pronunciation, the accent, further away from the British stuff. Whereas Southerners were happy with the mother country, and they're like, okay, we're going to try to keep everything as prim and proper as possible. And that was just the explanation given to me, and I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Whether it's true or not, we leave that to legends. So I have my blocks done. They aren't pressed yet, but I will share them real quickly. Then I can press them afterwards. So let me give you a big view. So this was the block that I already had done. And then again, these are all unpressed. I'll just shove them over here to let me know that I need to press them. Bonus points if you see the fabrics that are basically identical. This fabric was a lot of fun. The squiggly lines. Stephanie says she loves them, which is, great compliments from the pattern designer. Laura says her sister-in-law lives in North Carolina but was born and raised in the Midwest. When she was visiting home, she understood everything she said, went to church and couldn't understand a thing. There's the fishies swimming around in a circle. Then we have the really cool squirrels. And then this blue reminds me of the 90s. That's why I got that one. So all I have to do now is put sashing on them, put them in the quilt, and then borders. But I also want to get the bag done while everything is still fresh in my memory. So I'm probably going to shift to bag first when I get onto Steven's pop-up so day. Not soda, so day. Riley's going to go out first because it is currently sunny outside, which means it's a good time for Riley to go. Is the swirls a batik? I don't think anything was a batik. Well, this one was a batik, just because it looks the same on front and back. But everything else, like I had solid for a couple colors. But everything else, and I'm just looking at the backs, was prints. I'm There was another one that looked like, yeah, the blues, which this I thought could be a batik, but it's a print. So the only thing that I think is a batik, and even then it could just be a deep print, is this. Oh. This one right here, because it looks the same open as closed. And my camera is saturating it just wrong. So the colors are slightly off. Oh, and then the original block. I forgot the original block to show. So these are done. I just need to get them pressed open, sashed, borders, and then they can go onto the quilting machine. The borders I have are fun. Let me grab. I can show you the borders and the back. This is going to be the border, which looks very much summer picnicky quilty time. This is going to be the binding. And Stephanie's favorite, though she doesn't know it, is the backing. It's going to have sea turtles and dolphins and fishies. So I figured all of that would go awesome with the beach theme, which it's a beach bag. It's a picnic quilt. The person who is going to get this is going to love it to pieces. So yeah, I'm very excited. Again, like I said, it's a directional print on the back, so I got to. I'm fairly certain I have enough fabric. I did slightly overbuy, but it is now noon, and like I said, Riley wants to go out. She hasn't been out since 7:35 this morning. So she's probably saying, "Hey, I want to go around the neighborhood, and I want to get her outside before it gets too hot." And yes, black dog, bright sun, not a good combination in the summertime. So, if anybody is going to join Steven's pop up so day, he did paste a link in the chat a few minutes ago. Do join us. It's always a lot of fun. If you aren't interested in joining the pop up so day, there's still plenty of things to do on the YouTubes. There's content creators that are going live like basically every hour, it seems. So there's always something for you to watch. And Steven just shared it again. Thank you. I'm like I said, I'm going to go walk Riley real quick, and then I will be in the pop up so day probably in 15 or so minutes. So yeah, I hope everybody has a awesome day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.